the biggest thing about conscious parenting is an awareness of the nervous system, an awareness of what's going on. And the reality is between, the numbing activities that we engage in and the phone scrolling and the whatever else, we're actually just numbing and avoiding a lot.
Absolutely.
And not paying attention to our bodies.
Have you ever been in a situation as a parent where you're torn between two parts of yourself? From one side, you want to be this rational and emotionally mature parent. And on the other side, you're overstimulated, overwhelmed, and all you want to do is break down and scream. Well, I have been. And I often wonder, how do I apply all these healthy parenting tips to my kids when I'm not in the healthiest headspace myself? So this and so many other questions about kids and parenting, we're going to talk about with parenting coach, Louise Hurley. Hi, Louise.
Hi, how are you?
Yes, I'm very well. I'm very excited to have you here and talk about this topic that is so important, especially I feel like in these days when there is so much pressure on the new parents. And I feel like the generations before were not struggling with all these questions. Am I the most conscious parent? Am I, teaching all the right things to my kid? And I feel like right now these questions are so huge and people are struggling with guilt and overthinking what they're doing. Just a quick question about this, and then we'll talk about your story. What is the most common struggles you see in parents when they reach out to you?
Okay, well, I find that parents reach out to me when they have reached a crisis point. I have two kinds of clients. The first is the person who it's been on their mind for ages and things have escalated, and then they just decide, oh my gosh, we really need outside support here. And the other kind of client is somebody who is interested in parenting in general and is trying to sift through all the noise. Because as you said, previous generations, they just got on with it. They just did it. And now we have so much information at our fingertips. Yeah. It's so overwhelming. And we're scrolling constantly, seeing what we should and shouldn't do. And we're more aware of the implications of us raising our children and how we raise our children has for them as adults. So it's the parents that are worried and the parents that are in crisis.
Yeah, exactly. I think we are that generation as well that has so much information, and oftentimes it's contradictive information and advices that we see. And then we're like, oh my God, which one should I go for? Which one will be better for my children? All right, we'll talk about parenting and how to be the healthiest self around the kids. But I want to hear your backstory because this podcast is about also people, making big changes in their life. And I think you have few of them already. It sounds like, you moved countries, you blended cultures through marriage as well. So if you can talk about your personal story up to the point where you realized you want to go to be a parenting coach.
Okay, well, you can tell from my accent, I was born in Ireland, and I was there. I was educated in Ireland. I had my university education in Ireland. I wanted to do psychology, and that was the thing I was aiming for. And when I got into my first year of uni, I wasn't able to cope with being in uni. I wasn't able to cope with the independence. I became really overwhelmed. I actually dropped out of college and didn't tell anybody. And in that dropout, when my parents eventually found out, there was a scramble to get Louise back into higher education. What will we do? And everybody said, anybody who we asked or talked about it anecdotally with said, she would be great with kids. She's so good with kids. She's so patient, etc. So I had the points to do it. So I went into primary teaching, really just to keep my parents happy. And luckily for me, when I went into it, I found that I loved it. I loved the classroom. I loved the performance element of it. I loved the planning. So I started my career there. And I did a couple of years in Ireland. And then I moved to Dubai. And really, I moved to Dubai because I had spent a few years paying off a student loan, and I decided I am free. Let me explore. Let me use Dubai as a bouncing platform to travel. And I did that for a few years. And then, as we were saying earlier, the old story, I met somebody here. I was 2 years in. I had a permanent career, a pensionable job at home. And I said to myself, no, let me cancel that. Let me withdraw from that job and stay here. So I taught here for a number of years, and teaching here is extremely different to Ireland. We see different curricula, obviously. The first school I started in, I think I may have been the only qualified teacher on
And when
my
was
corridor.
that? How many years ago was that when you moved here and started teaching here?
That was about 2005.
Wow.
Right. I started in Sharjah. And I then moved to Dubai, and same branch of school. It was so different. Even things like safeguarding and things like that, I found that children here were much more openly affectionate, and they would come and they would give you hugs. But my training had told me, you don't allow children to hug you. You don't, because you don't want to put yourself in any compromising situations. You are never on your own in the classroom with somebody. And at that time, this culture was just so open and still is to children. Children are doted upon here. So it was very different in a lot of ways, in some really nice ways. And I spent a few years here doing teaching, and then it started to ramp up. It started to get more challenging. And I think the biggest turn for me came when I had my own children. And I always say I was an amazing parent before I became a parent. And I'm sure I was a judgy teacher, because I had my things that I wanted to do in the classroom. I knew how I expected children to behave. I could set boundaries with no issues. And parents were coming into me and they were telling me, oh, can you please talk to her about this or that? I can't get her to do it. And I would always oblige. I mean, I loved the interaction with parents, but I always found it a bit of a mystery. Why is it that I can do this, but you can't at home? It doesn't make sense. And then I had my first child. And I went, oh my God, because it's just different. And, apologies to my teaching colleagues who aren't parents and who are saying, you don't have to be a parent to be a good teacher. You absolutely don't. But when you become a parent, you just understand it slightly differently.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, before they become parents, they think we will never do this. We will never, they will listen to us as long as we're this, and the other. And then you try all these things that you think should work, and it doesn't, and it frustrates you.
Yes.
And then you learn that you need to actually regulate yourself. And what is that actually? How does that look? And what do I do? I agree. I think in a way, I was the same. I think I had very romantic idea of what it is to have children, and the reality is different. It's not just beautiful pictures. It's like learning to be a teacher for your child as well. And I was thinking about it, that some people like you have this natural talent of being a teacher and liking, teach them how to do all the things. And then there's other parents that don't like that. They just want kid to learn themselves, or they don't know how to teach them.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. And you were saying about Dubai that it's different to teach children here. And I wonder, is there an element of, Dubai is one of those places where there's so many cultures and nationalities. And therefore, I think also the parenting styles are so different. Did you see it as a teacher, maybe, that kids were different also because they were different cultures? And yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you had in a class, let's say in the school that I was teaching in at one point, I think there was like 70 different nationalities.
Wow.
But what I found was that lots of children were coming from multi-generational households. So you had a really established tradition of people living with grandparents.
Okay.
And, or, you know, where the mum goes to live with her in-laws for different nationalities here. So on the one hand, you had that. And so there was influences coming from the older generation there. And then on the other hand, you had, you know, people who were on their own. Like for me, I'm parenting just within my little nuclear family.
Yeah.
So connections are tentative. We all know what Dubai is like. Dubai can be very, very lonely. And, you know, for people parenting for the first time, it can especially feel like that. So what I found in the classrooms was a mixture. On the one, what really stood out was how affectionate children are, how openly affectionate. I don't think you would get an Irish child running up to you and giving you a hug. I just don't ever recall that in my career. There was kind of a distance. And I remember saying, we speak to Irish kids like they're little adults. You know, there was something very matter of fact about the way we spoke to kids. And I noticed that huge difference. There was a lot at the time, I felt like it was babying. I think I may have looked down my nose at it. I thought it was mollycoddling. There was a lot of, you're so cute and you're so this and you're so that. And I thought, come on, we need to be building them up. We need to be helping them become mature and independent. So,
you know what? Affection is an interesting thing because I've seen as well that like I'm quite affectionate with my children. We give kisses, we give hugs before we leave the house or before we go to sleep. And then I know a lot of families are not like that. And I think once my daughter was giving a hug to a kid and the parents were like, oh, whoa.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I was like, oh, maybe that's sort of, you know, for kids, nothing is inappropriate. But I was like, well, maybe for them, it's, you know, kind of a boundary somewhere that someone has overstepped, you know.
Kids are quite open, but we have a whole new generation of parents who are really aware of bodily autonomy. And because there's such a mixture of nationalities and cultural backgrounds in a classroom, you will have some children who are very aware. You don't put your hands on me unless I say so, which, you know, is a good thing to have in principle. We want our kids to be able to say when they're feeling uncomfortable. But then you have, on the other hand, the culture of children coming in and being so affectionate and so huggy. So it was about striking that balance between, you know, being affectionate, being warm and being yourself and also not intruding on someone else's boundaries. I found it as well as a parent, people pinching my child's cheeks or picking them up. And I remember being in a restaurant and somebody picked up, the waiter or the waitress picked up my son and said, I'm bringing them into the kitchen.
Yeah.
And my husband was fine with it.
Yeah.
And I was like, we can't see him. He's gone into a hot kitchen with knives and hot liquids.
I once went to my son, he was a baby, so he was sleeping quite a bit. So I went to a salon to do my nails while he was sleeping. And, you know, funny enough, obviously he woke up and in salon, there's so many ladies, very helpful. And they're like, I'll walk around so mommy can have her, you know, moment for herself. And I was not feeling comfortable. I was like, she picked him up and started walking around and left. And I was like, okay, where are you going? I was like, can she come back so I can at least see?
Yeah.
I know they mean well. There's no, you know, but I think especially when when you have a small baby, your maternal instincts are always wired and you're always like kind of, oh, you know, I need to be able to see the baby, which is, I think is reasonable as well.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yes.
And you were saying, you know, you and your husband, so you met here.
Yes.
And your husband is not Irish, right? Can you talk about these cultural differences at home and also having kids to raise them here? I have the same situation. My kids were born here. And so are they Irish? Are they Latvian? In my case, a big kind of identity questions that we're already discussing at home. And how is it for you?
That's a great question. So my husband is Lebanese and he has had an interesting upbringing because he is also from a mixed marriage. So his father is Lebanese, hence his nationality, because we know it passes down through the male line, and his mom is Kuwaiti. So he then spent his teenage years in Cyprus.
Oh.
So culturally, he was quite a third culture person when I met him. We met here in Dubai. I was young, I was Irish, and I was super duper Irish, and I still am very proud of my Irishness. But now when I look at us as a unit, I really feel that we're very much third culture people. Mm-hmm. Even though I wasn't raised elsewhere, I find it very hard to go back to Ireland and slip back into the way of things, silly things like I don't know how to top up my phone. I don't know what phone companies there are anymore. I don't get how things work anymore. I'm much more familiar with here. And I think my husband would say the same. Now, where my kids are concerned, they have Irish passports because an Irish passport is stronger. It's easier to move around. And we don't have family members living in Lebanon currently. Mm-hmm. They're all everywhere. My son really feels Irish, but he doesn't look what we would imagine a typical Irish child to look like. He's got these gorgeous brown eyes and really lovely olive skin and gets a lot of attention in Ireland and has this pseudo Dubai American twang that a lot of kids, develop here. But he feels very Irish. I wonder what's going to happen when he's older. I wonder if I feel like he's never lived in Ireland, and I don't know if he would like it.
It's interesting. I have one of my friends. He's also Irish, but he's lived in Middle East all his life. He's raised here, so he's very proud to be Irish. But then Irish people are like, well, you don't sound Irish. So there is this, he says, I almost feel like I sometimes have to, really say, well, but I am, I'm proud about it. But, and then the other part where the Irish are like, well, you don't sound like it, or do you like all the traditions? And then there's always this, and then he said, it's difficult because parents lived all his life here and they now moved to Ireland, but he doesn't feel Ireland is the home base because he was raised here. So there's all these questions for our kids as well. Eventually we'll probably move somewhere else. And then it's like, well, how will the kids feel if they've been raised here, but then we move somewhere else? So all these questions is always relevant for expats probably in Dubai.
Yes.
Right?
And I think it's so interesting you said about accents. I had a branch of first cousins that lived in LA. And I met them for the first time when I was about 17 years old. And I was so excited to meet them because they were American, right? We'd watched all the American shows on TV and they had obviously LA accents.
Of course.
They felt so Irish. And I, as an Irish teenager in the, 90s, my attitude secretly was, no, you're not. You're absolutely not. Yeah. Whereas I had a really good friend in secondary school in Ireland who was Indian and had a strong Irish accent. To this day, she's one of the most Irish people I know. A lot of it had to do with how you speak, how you express yourself. Exactly. And I think Irish people are a bit cheeky like that. We do hear the accents and go, no.
I've noticed in Dubai that every community is quite protective of their own people in a way, because British people tend to hang out kind of Brits together. Irish people are very much like not a closed group, but it feels like it's difficult to like really form meaningful relationships because they have so many things, in common. And I've been around sort of other Irish people and there's a lovely people. And then there's other where you can see that, they kind of like that they are with their own people.
I get you.
Yeah. And and the same for Latvians. There's also a Latvian group who hang out a lot with each other. And my husband and I were talking that for me, one of the best things about Dubai is the multicultural side of it. And we have friends, Germans, Turkish, all these different nationalities that I actually enjoy the most. Yes. All right. Enough about culture, which probably we will touch on it later as well. At what point did you figure out, I don't want to teach anymore. I want to go into coaching?
Oh, COVID didn't help. COVID was very, very tricky. And I had one child at the time and I was going through a really grueling IVF struggle to have my second, and COVID hit. And it was never the same for me after COVID. When we did all of our online learning, and I remember my son being downstairs with the nanny, and I could hear all the tears and the crying of trying to get, he was in year 1 at the time. And I was upstairs trying to teach my class live, and I couldn't help. That was a really frustrating time, I think, for a lot of families. And when we went back, it wasn't normal for the longest time. They had barriers up. And I started to get really frustrated. I started to see holes in what I was being asked to do as a teacher, what I was being asked to turn a blind eye to, what I was being forced to rush through, regardless of children's needs.
Okay.
You know, some children just need more time, or they need to learn in a different way, but we're very impacted by our environments. So it became frustrating. And then I had my daughter, and I had a tricky transition out of maternity leave.
Oh, I wanted to say, did you have this magical maternity leave where you figured, I'm not doing the old, I want to do something new? Or did you go back into teaching and then realize that it's not?
I was the kind of person where the universe had to scream at me. I had been toying with these ideas for many, many years. But I ignored them because I'm a safety first person. And I said, no, I need my job, and I need my security and my school place and all of this. But maternity leave, I had a premature baby. She was 6 weeks in NICU and found it hard to feed. And when I was going back to work, my work were not as supportive in terms of taking an hour to feed her. And she didn't take a bottle. So my hand was kind of forced. I was in a situation where, are you going to allow yourself to continue to be in this environment where it's not aligning with your goals for you as a person and for your family? Or are you going to go and do something about it? And of course, I had to be pushed. So, finally I reached a point I thought, what am I doing? I'm not happy. I feel like I'm betraying myself. I'm betraying my family, and it's not something I want to do anymore. I want to explore elsewhere. So I returned briefly just to see out the year as a cover teacher because I didn't have my own class. And then I decided to take the leap.
Amazing.
And yes, yeah.
And did you know straight away that you want to go into parenting coach? Were you kind of thinking about different options, different directions?
No, I knew straight away. Because of my own experiences as a parent, I had done a lot of personal growth. And it's interesting when you have such a big age gap between children. So I have a 10-year-old and a 2-year-old. The 2-year-old is getting a very different experience. Yeah. And the 10-year-old is, he's catching up on the outside in terms of, I'm really sorry about the first couple of years with you. We really were not aware.
That brings me to a point that I was thinking about as well. I almost feel like everyone's talking about how to raise children, but my feeling is that if we would get, as parents, more support, we intuitively would do a better job. I feel like that most of the time we make these mistakes because we are sleep deprived, or we're just overstimulated, overwhelmed. And maybe we can go on to some of the things that most parents struggle, in my opinion. And maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. And I saw actually on your Instagram as well, you were talking about nervous system and what happens with parents, like what's kind of happened actually with their bodies when they're overstimulated. And maybe if we would know, that would make us more aware and we would know what to do, so that we don't react, but we actually can understand that and collect ourselves.
I suppose what we need to remember and not beat ourselves up about is you are going to have moments where you are mad and when you're dysregulated. It is part of the human experience to feel emotions. And I was thinking about it the other day. Your emotions are kind of like a team of workers in the office. And you don't want one worker to be hogging the limelight. You don't want somebody to be not taking on their workload. You want to be able to manage your team of different emotions. So the biggest thing about conscious parenting is an awareness of the nervous system, an awareness of what's going on. And the reality is, between, the numbing activities that we engage in and the phone scrolling and the whatever else, we're actually just numbing and avoiding a lot.
Absolutely.
And not paying attention to our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
If let's say Paula at 6:00 screamed at her kids, you can go back to maybe 1:00 and it was beginning. Because it wasn't that thing that your kid did just there. It was a backlog of all the stuff and childhood things and pressures and everything else. But it was a backlog of all the stuff that had been going on. Had Paula, hypothetically, been attuned and more aware of what was going on in her body, she would have tweaked this at 1:00. And maybe she could have put measures in place, not to stop it. Look, sometimes we're enraged and that's okay. That's part of it. But to slow the train. We just want to slow the train. And also, these feelings, they're messengers. Anger is a huge messenger. Anger is a messenger for a boundary that has been crossed, that you just cannot ignore this anymore. And your body is now telling you, right, enough.
I want to talk about boundaries, actually, because I had that conversation with my therapist as well. I said, it's so funny, when you have other adults that are crossing the boundary, you have choice. You can, fight back or leave, ignore them, but with kids, it's different because that they're learning life, but it doesn't change how you feel that someone's crossed your boundary. So it's like, you don't know what to do in that situation because you kind of understand that they're children, they're going through the developmental stage. But you can't help but to also feel like a boundary was crossed. And I've had this moment, and I think it was also on your Instagram, fight or flight. And also with children, we have that. And I was like, that is one of the biggest revelations for me, that sometimes in order to protect them, we tend to repress our own feelings, just not to scream, just God forbid, raise a hand or something like that. And there are moments where I feel like I'm leaving my body because I'm just like, I need to finish this day and I'm just going to check out in order to just do all the functions that I need to do, get them out of the bath, clean them up, dress them. And I can feel that. And I'm like, I don't think that's healthy, but there's no other strategies that I know at that moment. Can you talk about when there's this really heightened moment and then it's either checking out or starting to scream and reacting? What is the healthier way maybe that you would suggest?
Well, you talked a little bit about sometimes you're repressing your response because I shouldn't. That's the story of many parents. I lost it and then I felt guilty. And then I lost it again and then I felt guilty. And you're on this merry-go-round of I lost it because they were disrespecting the boundary that I set in. And then I felt awful for how I handled it. It's a long-term goal. Unfortunately, I know we want to say 3 ways to make you, and it doesn't quite work like that. But in a fix, it's the pause. Can I create some space between this trigger and my response? We don't want it to be a knee-jerk reaction. We all have them occasionally, but we want there to be some space. So whether that's taking a breath and inhaling for 6 and exhaling for 4, creating that space. The other thing I always say to myself is, what is the most generous interpretation of this situation? Could I put on rose-tinted spectacles? Yes, she has just said, no, I don't want whatever it is. And I look back and I think, okay, hang on a second. What has the day been like? She's had somebody telling her what to do all day. And now I'm just adding to that load. She's 2.5 going on 3. That need for autonomy is really kicking up. All behaviors have an underlying root, and it's usually contextual, it's unmet needs, or it's feelings. So for me to keep calm in the moment, I am creating that pause. I am making sure that I'm saying, okay, what is the most generous interpretation? And then I'm also reminding myself, give it space. I don't need to say something here.
Okay.
Yeah. I sometimes we're really eager to impart the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually a double win, because the lesson in that moment is usually pointless. Because if a child is dysregulated,
he's not hearing anything.
No,
right?
that prefrontal cortex is absolutely offline.
Yeah.
So you trying to reason with and explaining why the thing is, it's just falling on deaf ears. It's going to ramp them up more. You're going to feel like you're not being listened to, which is going to ramp you up more.
Yeah.
So focus back in on the feelings. How am I feeling right now? What do I think that's about?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I say to myself, well, that makes sense.
Yeah, I was hearing, I saw an advice as well online about how to set a boundary and how to stick with that boundary, even when the kid is crying, to always sort of validate the feeling, like, oh, I know this sucks for you, but we can't do it. And I've tried doing that with, like, in a loving but like strict way, and it really helps. It really, because before I had this idea that there's two ways. Either you are a pushover and you let them do everything, or you're this disciplinary that, like,
exactly,
they can't do anything, and I'm struggling with that disciplinary, because if I could, I would be like, you can do whatever you want, but I know it's not for their benefit.
Yes.
So and I've been learning to be more of a, not authoritarian, like kind of strict parent, but strict parent, but in a soft and loving way.
Yes.
And I've seen some results, which is great. But again, that happens when I've had enough sleep, I've had break, when I can, like, just be, okay, this is where I'm consciously doing. And then I see results and it's great. And then the next day, I haven't had enough sleep and I can't do the same thing. And I'm like, I almost like don't have it in me to kind of be this calm force, that calms them and creates this great energy at home. So it's a work in progress.
It's a challenge, but here's the ultimate hack for that. One day I was really conscious, I was calm, and I was able to, because you're talking about meeting them in the middle, right? We don't want to be too authoritarian and we don't want to be permissive. We want to be, validating of their experiences and their feelings while holding the boundary. Mm-hmm. That's win-win. But that's quite hard to do, because we have to listen to the whining and the crying and the anger. Those are really uncomfortable emotions for us, because chances are that when you were a child, you were told something along the lines, there's one in every culture, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about, or it's fine, you're making a big deal, don't be so dramatic. We were given all of these things when we were little, and they become our inner voice. So now as adults, when we see our little ones whining / crying / complaining / being ungrateful, disrespectful, it becomes quite triggering, because our nervous system feels unsafe with it.
Yes, that is such a good point, because I was thinking about it as well. It's sometimes hard to not take it personally.
Yes.
Like when you're in that good space, you're like, it's nothing personal. Sometimes you need to be a punching bag, kind of in the best way, for them to let out emotions, because it's not towards you, it's just them releasing it. And then other times it does feel like, why are you doing this to me? I'm trying to help you. It's like you make food. You've cooked, both needs different, like one wants pasta, the other one wants like mashed potatoes, and you've done it all and you put them on a table and they're like, yucky, I don't want this. And like in this attitude, and you're like, okay. And I say to my husband, I think we'll drink wine later because you're struggling, to please them. And then when it's not met with some sort of gratefulness in a way, I do take it personally. I'm like, maybe I'm just cooking wrong. Maybe, my food is not tasty. And that's where I also struggle sometimes.
Because we can become so resentful when our efforts are not met with gratitude. And so this is part of conscious parenting, to be really aware of what your motivations are. We want to please them. Are we there to please them? I need to be really comfortable with their low satisfaction rating of me. I need to be okay with it, because I can't march to their beat forever.
Yeah.
I can definitely pick my battles. Somebody who's authoritarian will lean too much towards micromanaging, and that leaves everyone feeling flustered. But the permissive style of parent will be somebody who, it's not like they don't care about boundaries. They know that the boundaries should be there, but they're so uncomfortable with the responses that are coming in. But the hack for the days where you're not regulated and calm, your cup is not full enough to be like, actually, darling, I said only potatoes, so that's what's on the menu tonight. I don't want that. And you have to listen to that.
Yeah.
And finally you go, boom, you're so ungrateful. Or some variation. The hack is that even if you do lose your temper, there's a great modeling opportunity to happen. When you calm down, you get to come back and own the situation. It's not okay to be screaming at your kids, but we all are human, and we all have moments where it just becomes so overwhelming. Your losing your temper is an opportunity to come back and say, can we have a chat? Because I know earlier that I got really cross, and I could see that you didn't like it, and I could see that it was quite scary. So I want to say I'm sorry. I should have tried to calm myself down a little bit first. It's really important to me that you eat the food that I put on the plate, or whatever, the boundary.
That's so interesting as well, because there are days, and I agree with my husband, Connor, we'd be like, this is what I've made. Everyone's eating the same food. I'm not going to make for everyone. And there's been times, and it's also like work in progress. Sometimes it's like all of a sudden everyone sits down. This is what we're having. There's nothing else. And everyone's eating. And I'm like, and there's been these wins, and I'm sitting there like, oh, wow, okay. And the next day, I'll do the same thing.
Yeah.
Nope, I don't want it. And I'm like, there we go. Okay. Yes. So I guess, and what I end up doing is like, okay, I'll make you a toast. And then I sometimes think, well, maybe I should just let her not eat. She'll be hungry. And then tomorrow she will be like, well, I don't want to be hungry today, so I'll eat. So I don't know. Where's that boundary? Where's that line with kids? You obviously want them to be fed so that they don't wake up at night, they don't scream. And then there's one part of me that thinks I'm just going to give her something. And then there's other part, well, maybe I'm teaching her that, she can always like not eat.
Yes.
What I want. And also then I'm like, well, what if she just doesn't like the food? Well, she, for example, she doesn't eat chicken, fish, meat. She doesn't like it. So obviously I'm not going to force her to be like, well, this is what it is. And, if you eat it or you don't. Yeah. So there's always this fine line between, is this just an attitude? Or because she's very visual, she doesn't like something how it looks.
Okay.
And she won't eat it. And we've played this game where she closes eyes and I'm like, well, guess what it is? And I'll give her some food and she'll be like, that's yummy. And she opens up. No, it's chicken. I don't like it. Yeah.
Oh.
So it's interesting. I was like, okay, she likes just the food to look good,
Yes. Well, there's so much that goes into, making something appetizing, but you definitely don't want a power struggle going on.
Yeah.
During meal times. The other thing is, look at what they're eating across the week. Mm-hmm. Don't just pick that one day where they are very in tune with how hungry or how full they are. We tend to override a lot of that. Yeah. One more bite for mommy. And do you want the broccoli tree and whatever else? Provide the variety, but make sure there's something on her plate that she will eat. Mm-hmm. Picky eating and just eating in general, meal times in general is such a huge thing.
Yeah.
It's such a worry, but we carry a lot of our own baggage into that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I had to finish the plate, and if not, then the sun is not going to come out tomorrow or something like. No, it was. Well, my mom cooked really good food, but it was always more than actually I wanted, and I always remember that. And that's like in sort of Eastern European culture. I almost feel like that the plate has to be full with food. Actually, Irish people also have like big, heavy
hearty dinners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you feel a little bit guilty if you don't finish it, or like that they might think that it's, not the most polite thing to
Yes.
kind of leave food on the table, on a plate. All right, let's move away from the food. So maybe last little tip, what would you say? What's the best tip for the food? So put something that you know that they're going to eat on the plate. And even if they don't eat other things, as long as you see that they've eaten what they like eating. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't want them to go hungry, but we do want to expand their taste buds.
Mm-hmm.
We also need to take into consideration their age. They do go through picky eating.
Yeah.
3, 4, 5. They do. That's the time. Don't make any food taboo, and don't bribe with food. The ice pops, whoopsies.
Well, we've had these. I'm like, well, if you're going to finish rice and egg, then you'll get like little ice cream afterwards. And then she'll be like, okay. And so I said to Connor, I was like, I don't think bribing with ice cream is the best thing. But sometimes when I'm like worried that she hasn't eaten, and then really with my daughter, it really works when I talk about health. And I'm like, well, if you're going to eat this, you're going to be really strong and very smart. And then she keeps saying, Mom, I'm going to look how much muscles I have because I ate today all lunchbox at school. And I'm like, okay, that works. So it's important for her to be strong, healthy, and, pretty. So, yeah. All right. I want to ask you about another question that I struggle. So sorry, this is basically a consultation.
That's okay.
You're just consulting me on my struggles. What about a word no? There's been a lot of advice online that no should not be a word that you use with kids. And I can't see how I could not use that word when, especially I have 2 kids. I have 3.5 and 1.5. So they're fighting all the time to a point where they don't know the consequences, so they can push or they can, hit or bite and it's just my first reaction is no, don't do it, stop. Which I don't know. When it comes to their safety, I think it's okay to say, but when is it too much? When no word could be used, or when could you use an alternative to a word no?
Well, first of all, we shouldn't be afraid to say no.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way you say it matters. Safety, obviously, you're going to grab somebody off from walking off into a road or what have you. But I'm thinking if there is a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old and they're sitting on the floor and they're fighting and one starts to bite the other, your no could be very urgent and you're jumping up and you're grabbing them. That's your nervous system. It's protecting you in this situation. It's saying, quickly, you need to do something, take action. But I would be very wary of a child who has never heard no, who everything is molded around, presenting things to them in an affirmative way constantly, because they are going to start to hear no. But you can deliver the no in a very loving way, because you're going to accompany that no with, I absolutely get why you want to do this. It's empathy. If you have a moment ever, Brene Brown has a wonderful video on empathy. It's on YouTube. It's years old. But we are very confused as to what empathy is. We kind of think it's a poor you, or that's awful, or I felt really sad to hear that, and we're turning it back on ourselves. But empathy is simply seeing the other person and seeing what they're going through. That is all children need. When we're raising kids, we want them to have a secure attachment to us. And in order to get that secure attachment, they need safety, they need to be seen, and they need to be soothed. So that's safety is nervous system safety and the physical safety. Seen is my own inner world makes sense. I'm upset about this, and my mom and dad know that I'm upset about this, and they understand that I'm upset about this.
This is a big one, because
Huge.
I think a lot of people, they were raised like, oh, why are you crying? Oh, can you stop crying, please? And then there's this moment when you learn, you're like, oh, I get it. I get why you're crying. And then for them, that makes the biggest difference, because they understand that whatever they're feeling is okay.
Yes.
I had this one conversation with someone who, my kids were running around. And this person said, well, my kids would not run around. This is like, they know when they can run and when they can't. I'm like, yeah, but they have these impulses. They can't sit still. maybe I look like a parent who is letting them do too many things, but equally, I feel like if they want to, and they are in that stage when they can't stay still, why would I force them? Right. And then if you force them, then it feels like they have this impulse, but they think it's wrong because parent said no. And then they eventually, is that the case where eventually they're just start not listening to their impulses and start not listening to what they want themselves? Or how does that work?
If they can control it, they will. Young children, they are there to please you. In their heads, you are the person who their survival is reliant upon. So they always want to do what you say. They always want to make you happy. But there are lagging skills here. And sometimes it's simply not possible without support. So if you look at a restaurant situation where somebody has two very young children and they're expecting the two young children to sit down at the table, that takes a lot of support. That's why we see so many people with iPads at the table, because on some level they know that it's not appropriate to expect a child to be sitting, and not making a peep for an hour. Then there are other instances where people say, well, okay, they need to run around. You have to look at the suitability of the environment. But if you're constantly on their back about, sit down, come on, rather than, I can see it's really hard to stay still. Let's see if we can come over here and, wiggle, whatever, and then come back. Or let's see if we can do some coloring. If you're redirecting them and helping them, that's a supportive environment. If you're doing it in an overly powerful way where you're getting cross and you're asserting your control, their brain records this and tries to make sense of it. And they won't try to make sense of it in a way of, oh, my mum's a bit narky right now and she's probably not being super fair with me. It's normal for me to run around. They will record it as, I'm wrong here. I must be the bad one. I must be the one, because they're reliant on you for survival. So it becomes internalized. I want to jump around, but that's not good. And if they can control it, they will. And if they can't, they'll feel bad about it.
And what if they don't listen? So that's another thing that you were mentioning at the beginning, that there are parents that they're talking and it feels like the kids are just not listening to them. What are the maybe strategies as well to make them listen in a healthy way?
So if we're talking about young children, the biggest thing I think is just make a note for a week. How often do you talk to them from across the other side of the room? Hey, can you stop that? You have to please do. The other thing is connecting first. We all know that stopping the TV is a huge drama in most houses. Our TV remote broke last night. Can you imagine? I was like, oh, I have to turn this thing off. And the 2.5-year-old was looking at me like, more? But when you're about to transition from one activity into another, when you're stopping their dopamine hit of whatever it is that they're doing, you can't come in cold turkey. You have to warm up. Hey, Mike, look what you're doing. That's so nice. I did something like that yesterday. You want me to show you? And then you move them away and then say, right, listen, here's what we're going to do now. X, Y, Z.
What do you think about putting a time on things? So for example, my daughter will watch a cartoon and I'll say to her, okay, 5 minutes and then we're going. And then I'll say 2 minutes. And then by the time we have to go, she's sort of ready, I've noticed. But then there's other times, like you said, I will tell her to do something and she's just ignoring me. And I heard something, and you can tell me if this is right or wrong. Another one of those advices online where you leave everything that you're doing, you go up to the child, lean down so that you're in eye contact, and then calmly but strictly say, I want you to now go and wash teeth. Is that what you do? Because I did it once and it actually worked.
Yes.
Because I'm obviously, doing something else or cleaning the baby and I'm like, come on. And she's just not coming. And I'm like, where are you?
Yes.
What is it? Why is it like that? Why do they need this direct kind of contact with the parent to kind of register?
Yeah, that's executive function. Executive function is the ability to say, okay, I'm going to stop this. It's planning. I'm going to stop this thing and then I'm going to go and do that thing and that thing. And they don't have the capacity to exhibit. That is literally, where's your school bag? Oh, it's in the house. That is what that is. So they need the support. So getting down, eye contact. This is why don't say it to them across the room. Give them notice. I wouldn't give them multiple warnings, or 2 minutes left, 1 minute left, because you suck the joy out of what's left. So really, if you're doing that, but we use an Alexa set a timer for 5 minutes, and then go and down at eye level. Listen, we're going to stop in 5 minutes, okay, and then we'll go up and have some. We'll put on our jammies or whatever it is. But yes, you do connect first. And then when Alexa goes off, very chirpy, okay, oh, look at Daniel Tiger. He's
and it's
so
not
funny.
you. It's not you put it like stopping whatever they're doing. It's Alexa.
This is the rule. Alexa has gone off. So we know that we're going to do this now. And you can build that up. I mean, like if that's your nightly routine or your daily routine, they know what to expect. They do really well with what comes next, because mornings are a huge thing, right? For people getting out the door. And what do you mean you haven't brushed your teeth? You do have to be on them. That's executive function. I can tell you now that my 10-year-old still needs that level of a certain degree of following around. And I'm trying to now put it back on him like, okay, what can you do? Because I'm getting annoyed sitting in the car and you're trying to find your shoes. What can we do? How can we problem solve this? You'll pitch it differently for each age. But is it a visual at the door? Not a sticker chart, but a visual at the door. Have I done this, what's next? Okay, awesome. They respond really well to visuals.
That's a good one.
So there's a lot of little things that you can do. But yes, executive function is.
I want to ask you about also parent role when it comes to siblings and sibling rivalry between them. I have 2 kids that are 2 years between them, and you can see there's some jealousy going on between them. Who's going to get the attention from me? And then when they fight, I often like, how do I, soothe both of them? And then I'm trying to look, well, who was sort of guiltier? And then I go to and then I'm like, I want to make sure that she understands, or he understands, that even though he was the guilty one, I get, and then it becomes a little bit overwhelming of like, how do I get, how do I say it, emotionally present with individually, both of them in a situation where they're against each other. You know what I mean? That's a big one for me and my husband. A lot of the times is, making sure it's fair. Yeah. That it's not like, well, you're always, because he's a baby, you always, go and kind of go to him. So I really try not to do that. But is there a way to kind of be in between the siblings as a parent?
Well, what you want to do is try to preempt. I know easier said than done, but you want to try and preempt any physical aggression. So if you see like somebody's a bit handsy, then, that's when you say, okay, come on, we're going to come over here, or I'm going to help you with this. My view on it is hopefully you can avoid the aggression, but you help them problem solve. You can't be present completely for each one individually, but I do go to the injured party first. And the other thing I always try to do is something called sportscasting. So that is you're narrating what's happening and you're putting in questions like, oh, I have Tig and Maeve. Okay. So I can say, Maeve, I can see that you want Tig's attention and you're tapping and he looks very busy. Is there something you want to say to him? Tig doesn't look like he's heard you. Do you want to try that again? And, Tig is the bigger one. So he's just getting irritated and going, God, get away from me, bro. And you're kind of narrating it. Tig looks like he's getting cross. Yeah. And she's pushing and pushing more. Now you've got much younger children. But you're starting up that you're narrating look at what's going on for the other person. Oh, and Maeve, I can see you're starting to get cross. Yeah. And as soon as she gets handsy, I come and I say, come over and sit here with me for a minute. you don't seem like you're ready to talk with Tig or whatever it is. It's high involvement. You know, I remember being 10 years old in a caravan in Salt Hill in Galway in the west of Ireland, and my parents just had it, and they let me and my brother fight it out. And I still remember, A, how injured I got with all the pinching.
Wow.
But B, I mean, they were obviously spent. They were on holidays in the west of Ireland. It was lashing rain in a caravan, and they were like, these kids, just duke it out. Just try. And we killed each other.
My husband said, well, maybe we should let them, you know, see if they can sort it out themselves. But I have too much anxiety when I see them, because I kind of feel that they don't know the consequences of something happening.
Yes.
And I don't want them to, you know, something bad happening and then them feeling bad about it.
Yes.
You know?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You have to try and preempt it. You're supporting them with their social skills, and you're validating each one. Now, if you have a 1-year-old, you're keeping that in mind as well, that they are one.
Yeah.
0, 0, 0 impulse control.
Exactly.
It's a little bit easier in terms of me having a 10-year-old and a 2.5-year-old, but that 10-year-old still comes out of things fuming. Mm-hmm. She just keeps pitching me. and I will always make a big effort to be like, that I know how irritating that is. Yeah. That is so annoying. But I will speak to them both separately afterwards when they've calmed down. Do you think she has any control over that? What could you do to lessen that situation?
Another situation that myself and my husband are often in, the moment there will be quiet, like kids playing, the moment we start talking, it's mom, 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 mom. And we're like, yes. And there's she thinks, what could I ask?
Oh, really?
And then I'm like, I almost feel like she's waiting for us to start talking. And so she wants to interrupt. And then I sometimes would be like, okay, what would you like to say? Then she tries to say something, I will answer. And I'm like, okay. And I try to finish my sentence to my husband, and she'll start again. And I'm like, what do I do? And I'm like, okay, let me finish with Daddy. She gets upset. And I'm like, how do I, make sure that she doesn't feel like I'm ignoring her, but equally that there's a boundary. I'm talking with, my husband, and I will talk to you afterwards. Or like, what would you say? Is it better to make sure that they feel heard and sort of move away from the conversation and listen to them? Or should we finish conversation with another adult and then talk?
Well, 2 ways to approach this. Long-term is always a thing, isn't it? So long-term, you're looking at how full is their cup. Like if I think about that, that's typically a need for connection. And so I'm going to try and make sure generally that there's enough connection going on. Mm-hmm. But then the other thing is you're going to try to teach her that sometimes conversations need to happen.
When you say connection, what do you mean connection? Is that like that she knows that, you have a conversation with the kid and that she knows that she can come up to you? Would that be sort of...
Connection is quality time. Mm-hmm. And it can be as simple as, Dad's running into Spinneys to get something and you and her are sitting in the car having a chat.
Yeah.
And just shooting the breeze with each other. That's connection. Mm-hmm. That it's that bonding. Most of us are working parents, and time is a huge thing. And our time, this is why there's so many bedtime issues. Often one of the reasons is because it's that time to refill the cup, to spend the quality time together. And you can do it even as a working parent, but you have to be really intentional about it. And we're often on our phones.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely guilty of it myself. And my daughter will 100% call me out on it now and say, you were gone for so long today. I go upstairs to do meetings and she'll say, you'll see you later.
This is so funny. We were also talking about how we think that we're better parents than the generation before and generation before. And then equally, I think there's going to be new ways that kids will be, maybe not traumatized, but will have effect on, screens and phone.
100%.
And what do you think about screens, by the way? What is your stand on screens? Because there are, like you said, there are moments where, okay, this is not appropriate. Like in a plane, eventually you can't run around. Everyone's like quite, charged up when they're there. So, we tend to give the screens there. But what do you think? How much is okay? And would be a different approach for different kids as well? Like, what do you think?
I think of screens in general, the biggest issue I see with screens is our screen time and how much it removes us from being present with each other and with our kids, because I have my phone on a string around me at any given time. Like, I'm very connected to it. So I think that's the biggest thing with screens. In terms of how much you should be having, I think the American Pediatrics Association or something like that says under the age of 2, there should be 0 screen times. I don't think that's realistic if you live in Dubai and you are FaceTiming with parents and grandparents and things like that. But the other thing is, it's the quality of what they're watching. Are they allowed to zone out on it? It has its place. As far as I'm concerned, as a busy parent, it has its place. It allows me to do something at times.
Yeah.
And also, you can't hide from it. Your cap on the amount of screen times needs to be very linked into your family values. And if your family values are, and this is when I work with clients, especially on longer intensive courses, one of the big things we do at the start is, what are your family values and what boundaries are going to come out of those? So if honesty is a value, if connection is a value, then if their screen time is directly getting in the way of one of your values, that is a red light. And the other thing is, if the proportion of their day is not right. So I don't put a time on it per se, but if my 10-year-old has been out at Aventura ziplining all day and has then spent more time playing with a friend, I'm cool with you being on your PlayStation now.
Yeah.
And it's going to change and it's going to evolve a little bit. I guess for me, for older kids, the one rule I have is during the day, no screens, because I feel like they use too much screens at school. I've seen it myself.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. During the day, for us, it's the same. During the day, there's no screens, no TVs, no phones. And then in the evening, sometimes when I'm cooking, we put on something. And sometimes in the morning when I'm getting ready, the lunchbox, we're getting out of time. So I have actually 3 more questions. I have to choose which ones to ask. One was bedtime routine.
Yes.
What do you think? How does a healthy bedtime routine looks like? I'm just thinking, because I talked with so many other parent friends, and they have so many different ways of trying to make sure that the kids go to sleep. And me and my husband, now we're putting kids in the same room. So then we both are sitting there until they fall asleep. And then I would like to get to the point where we read a bedtime story and I'm okay sitting in a chair and they both fall asleep or but they still want that. My daughter wants me to sit with her or sleep with her so she feels and she falls asleep very quickly. But obviously that takes a lot of the evening time. The bedtime routine sometimes is like an hour and a half. And Connor and I sometimes are like, this is way too long, it feels like. So what do you think? What would be the advice for parents who are struggling with?
You have to do what works for you. If you sitting there with a child for 10, 15 minutes until or whatever length of time it is, until they go asleep is something that you can manage, then great, do it. Keep in mind that if you don't do what the child is looking for, you potentially are making this situation longer because you've got this battle right now. It's a power struggle of in and out and in and out. So you get to know what your kids want. Do they want the extra cuddle? Do they want the story? What is a bigger battle? Is giving it to them and just relenting for that 5, 10, 20 minutes, whatever, going to get you to that end point faster? Then I would do that. I mean, my 10-year-old still, his dream is to share a sleeping space with us all. He just wants to be in with us. I just can't. I'm just tired at this point.
That's so interesting because I will have friends who will sleep with their baby throughout. So basically husband sleeps in one room and she will sleep with the baby for, until 2-3 years. I had it until like 6-7 months. And then I always had a cot next to our bed. So I needed that at least few hours at night where I'm just sleeping the way I want to sleep and I'm not in one position stiff. My back was already stiff every morning, but I needed that time for myself. Is that also kind of on individual basis, however it works? Because my last question to you is how to not lose connection with husband as well, because I feel like that is another thing, the triangle between the husband, the wife, and the kid, and all of a sudden wife becomes a mother, and the whole skin to skin is with the child, obviously, but then I feel like the husband feels left out, and how to balance all of that. And at what point is it okay to leave the baby or the toddler separately in a separate room, separate bed, and then separate room? Is there any?
I don't think there's a particular age, because all children are different, and some will need it and want it longer. Like I said, my 10-year-old has said creepy things to me, like, I want to unzip you and just climb into you. And I just think, gosh, that's creepy. But what he's expressing is, I just love the cuddles.
Yeah.
Whereas I can see the younger one is going to be a little bit more independent. She's moved out of the bed and into a side proper toddler bed now. And we will edge out as time goes on.
Yeah.
We want to be attuned to their needs while not totally abandoning yourself as well. So it's trying to figure out what that balance is. That's why it's so hard. And in terms of losing your connection with your husband and things like that, you have to really work at it. I feel like we're all guilty of absolutely throwing ourselves into parenthood at the beginning, at the expense of other things.
Yeah, that's one thing that I was thinking about as well, that we think we want the best for our children, and that is closeness and be able to nurture them, but we also want them to have happy parents, and sometimes that is, they'll be fine for a few hours if you and your husband go and do something, right?
Yes.
All right. Last question. I want to end this podcast with a question I want to ask every guest. And can you tell me one life's lesson that you can think of from your life where it was a moment of a light bulb going on above your head, and you're like, whoa, okay, this is something I've learned and I know it's profound?
There's one moment that stands out for me, and it was with my son, and I had been stressing about, I said I would organize a party for him around Christmas time for his friends, and it all became I had taken too much on board. And in my bid to meet all of his crazy requests for these kind of cookies and these kind of sweets, and the workload that I also had to do, I became a hot mess. I was cranky and irritable, and I was changing the plan several times. And while I was in the midst of this dysregulation, he turned around to me and said, "Mom, you are so unpredictable. I don't know where I stand with you." And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. We need to get it together. What we are doing has an impact. And sometimes when we are trying so hard to meet all of their needs, it's not going to work out, because by absolutely abandoning ourselves in the process, we'll get this response: "Ma, I don't know where I stand with you. You're absolutely martyring yourself to meet my needs. And I feel awful about it because you're clearly resentful of it." And that was a wake-up call for me to say, you know what? I'm very important in this equation. I'm actually pivotal in this equation. I need to take care of myself so that I can come to the table, calm and happy and whole. And that's what they need more than anything else.
Presence. Beautiful. Let's end on that note. Thank you, Louise. And everyone who's watching, if you'd like to connect with Louise Hurley on Instagram, they can send you a DM or find your website as well, right?
So it's at Parent Prosper Coaching on Instagram, and the website is parentprospercoaching.me.
Perfect. All right, everyone, reach out to Louise, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you.